big one to watch this year might be liver fluke. We've had an extremely wet summer, obviously, and I think some of the test results that have been done at national level are showing a lot higher of a liver fluke burden than in previous years, and that's to be expected. We have a lot of rain, about the wet summer, cattle standing in wet fields. Some are talking about rumen fluke issues as well. I'm hearing that. So some farmers are going with maybe an oxytocin or whatever to try and combat rumen fluke. But look, it depends really on whether you actually have the issue on your farm. Some people make an assumption they may have rumen fluke when it's actually maybe a liver fluke problem they need to be dealing with.
Hello and welcome to the Beef Edge, the Teagasc beef podcast for all your latest news, information and advice for Irish beef farmers. I'm Catherine Egan, and on this week's episode I'm joined by DairyBeef 500 Programme Manager Alan Dillon and Programme Advisor Fergal McGuire to get an update on the programme and discuss winter management. Alan and Fergal, you're very welcome. Alan, overall it's been a difficult year on farms across the country and weather made grazing difficult across the year.
It has, Catherine, yeah, and I suppose certain parts of the country fared worse than the others. I suppose the southwest typically fared the worst. I imagine overall, if you take the whole year, we started off with a bit of a dry February that didn't really do much for some people, but a bit of early graze and a bit of slurry got out. But we had a bad March and April, and then that was followed by a bit of a small drought in June, which was welcome to get silage in the May as well. But then since July in the south, it's been extremely wet right through since probably middle of June. So overall, I suppose we've been dealing with very, very high levels of rainfall. Some of the weather stations are looking at around, I'd say, anything from 300 to 500 mil over the yearly average, depending on how the rest of the year fares out, which is very substantial and it's very visible on land at the minute. Some certain parts of the country, especially heavier areas, are extremely saturated and have been for a number of months now. In terms of grass growth, I suppose it didn't actually fare out too bad. While it was extremely wet, the mild temperatures did allow grass to grow at probably a better rate than we expected. So we're probably not going to be back in terms of grass growth rates at any great degree this year. The problem has been the utilisation of it, damage to ground, and we've had to house stock, I suppose, a hell of a lot earlier than we expected to.
With the heavy rainfall, Fergal, Alan has mentioned there how utilisation on farms was difficult. How are programme farmers managing to extend the grazing season on farms?
The plan that was put in place for the autumn plan kind of went out the window. Usually, particularly in my neck of the woods there, you'd have weanlings out grazing until the 1st of December. Most of them are all back in now at the moment. Look, grass growth has been fairly good up until now. We are seeing there is heavy covers. The number of farmers there with covers of over 2,000 at the moment. So, look, we'll just get out with cattle maybe in January if we get a dry spell. Same as last year, get out with cattle and just get them grazed off and get them growing back again. But look, there is a lot of heavy covers out there at the moment, but you couldn't go out and graze them with the ground conditions at the moment. You just couldn't go out and graze them.
And Fergal, from the results of silage samples taken on farms, what is the quality of the silage this year?
Looking at it, first cut silage is good. Looking at the range, so the worst we had was 69 DMD. And I went all the way up to 78 DMD for red clover silage. So May and June, there was good spells there that were good silage was cut. And even for second cut and third cuts, there was opportunities in my neck of the woods, and maybe not with you, Alan, but in there was just a couple of spells there when second and third cut was coming that there was opportunities to take it out. So look, silage quality from what I'm seeing anyway is good at the moment. Maybe Alan is probably bit worse than with you, I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose we've seen again a big variation in results. Again, the reseeded swars that were cut early and maybe the red clover silage performed quite well, up into the 70 to 78 TMD. But you did see there was very little opportunity, especially with the way ground conditions went, probably into July down around the south, unless you're on extremely free draining ground, that getting them second cuts off is a bit of a problem. And while some of our programme farms might have picked out some silage here and there along the way, that mightn't have been too bad, maybe in the mid to high 60s. I suppose nationally, and I know looking at silage results that I'm seeing outside of the programme farms, there's some extremely poor silage made this year. Even some first cuts that were delayed, being closed up and went into July. It was extremely poor stuff that was made, and there's a lot of ration going to be needed now to balance that out this winter to maintain performance and stock, and that's going to come at an extreme cost.
That's true, Ellen, particularly with weanlings that's been housed on farms and been managed through now until the spring. How are they being managed on the programme farms?
Look, I suppose performance on a lot of the farms is back, given that the dry matters were so low for the summer period in the grass, especially with calves. So we're looking at weights being back probably up to maybe 20, 30 kilos in some scenarios on calves, and maybe bigger cattle could be anything from 30 to 50 kilos back, depending on, I suppose, the weather you experienced, and I suppose the stocking rate in the farm, and maybe how much pressure stock we're under trying to graze out heavy wet swards. So I suppose, look, what we'll be saying is if your weanlings are back a bit, you probably need to go with a bit of extra ration. So maybe you're going to give them that extra kilo or kilo and a half over the winter, plus good quality silage to try and grow them on a bit. Now, I suppose what you don't want to hit is maybe the impact of compensatory growth next spring. So what we would be recommending is to maybe feed on a bit of extra meal now, between now and maybe next January, and then maybe you can start to taper them off then prior to turn out to grass there in March. I suppose, look, it's an expensive way of doing it, but I don't see too many other options that are there at the minute. If your weanlings are back, you want to make up some of that ground, not to be totally relying on compensatory growth to get them back on track next spring. So it is about putting in that ration and testing that silage and see what you're dealing with.
And for the silage after mentioning there, I suppose there's huge variation across from the programme farmers and possibly non-programme farms. What kind of ration or what ingredients should farmers be looking at now for in rations for those weanlings?
Yeah, for weanlings, I suppose you're looking at a bit more of a high protein diet. So, you're looking to get that bit of soya bean meal into it or whatever, some kind of a high protein source. It does make it that little bit more expensive in terms of putting a ration together, but it's warranted in terms of the performance you're going to get, and it'll shorten the finishing period hopefully at the other end next year. For your finishing stock, you're looking at high energy, high maize, high barley, probably 70 to 80% cereals in it to try and get them stock a bit of fat cover in the stock and have them gone in maybe 60 to 100 days.
And Fergal, heavier stock had to be housed a lot earlier this winter and possibly some over the summer. How are they being managed now over the winter until they're finished out of the shed next spring?
Yeah, so look, probably I had a few farmers that actually had to house cattle because it was too dry in May and June. Grass growth had slowed down significantly, so there was cattle housed at that stage there, and they were finished in August. They finished at light weight, so they would have been housed at maybe 480, 490 kilos, black white bullocks. Frisian bullocks, and they'd have been finished around 550, 560. So they were killing out around 270, 280. Then again in September and October, you had the wet spell and cattle were housed again. Look, they're coming here fit now at the moment, so lads would want to be just throwing an eye and a hand on them and pulling them off as they come fit. Look, generally what we're saying is we're saying a high energy ration, so 5 kilos of high energy ration plus good quality silage. If your silage is down in the mid 60s, you'd probably want to be upping the meal up to maybe 6-7 kilos. But for 70 plus DMD silage, we're talking 5 kilos of a high energy ration. And look, with your traditional breeds, 60 days will do a lot. So that just keep an eye on them. You don't want them to be going over fat, especially your heifers. With your Frisian bullocks, they'll probably need a bit longer. But there is Frisian bullocks coming fitted 60, 70 days. As well. So look, that's what you'll be feeding is depending on what your silage and analyze between 5 and 7 kilos of meal.
Alan, I suppose the health plan for each of the farms, they're tailored with the vet and the farmer. What are the main treatments the farmers are carrying out now?
Yeah, I'd say, Catherine, the big one to watch this year might be liver fluke. We've had an extremely wet summer, obviously, and I think some of the test results that have been done at national level are showing a lot higher of a liver fluke burden than in previous years, and that's to be expected when you have a lot of rain, about the wet summer, cattle standing in wet fields. Some are talking about rumen fluke issues as well. I'm hearing that. So some farmers are going with maybe an oxytocin or whatever to try and combat rumen fluke. But look, it depends really on whether you actually have the issue on your farm. Some people make an assumption they may have rumen fluke when it's actually maybe a liver fluke problem they need to be dealing with. Worm control is also happening at the minute, so there's farmers are dosing cattle for worms going into the shed, and also lice treatment. So I suppose, look, we generally find that farmers need a couple of runs to lice treatment. That a lot of the products that have been used, they have a life cycle of probably 3 or 4 weeks before a follow up treatment is needed. Clipping the backs as well is excellent practice in terms of reducing the issues with lice. And if you can get your clippers out and give a good wide cut up along the back, just to clip the hair, eliminate that habitat for the lice, and then give your pour on, you're probably your best chance of controlling it. And then finally, you have your vaccines. I suppose there's some people do them are doing the stock for IBR going into the shed, giving them their IBR booster, which lasts 6 months. That's the live vaccine, the live injection, and we would be encouraging farmers of weanlings into the shed to cover them for RSV and PI3, be that which is basically two forms of pneumonia, which is done by either an intranasal one-shot program or else an injectable two-shot program. Typically, the intranasal ones probably cover for around 3 months, which will get you over the main danger period until stock are settled inside. But they do work a lot quicker. Or else you go with the two-shot program, which is generally two shots given either 3 or 4 weeks apart, depending on the manufacturer. And these typically give around 6 months of cover, so it covers them right through probably to turnout next year. So look, it's up to every farmer what he wants to administer, but we would be recommending, especially given the weather conditions we're having, these typically wet, damp, mild days. We haven't really getting any nice, hard, frosty weather yet. Stock are doing a lot of coughing in sheds, and I would be taking note of any coughing that's going on in sheds too. Try and assess, is it a liver or a lungworm problem, should I say, or is it a viral problem that's there? Especially if you hear a lot of coughing, you kind of need to diagnose between the two and see what's the correct course of treatment to take. And I suppose for diagnosing worm issues or fluke issues, it's good practice to take a dung sample and get it tested inside with your vet or in a lab and see is there any evidence in the sample of any treatment needed.
Fergal, there are a number of farmers across the country currently completing the dairy calf to beef course. How are they going so far?
Yeah, so look, last August, this August gone by, we had 37 students that graduated from the dairy calf to beef courses. So there was a southwestern course, and then there was a southeastern course. So look, it was spread over 5 days. The first day was everyone went to Grange, so that was all to do with different calf to beef systems. So we looked at the returns, the possible returns, and the different targets that have to be met within each of the systems. Then we had Nicky Byrne there, and he just brought us through the work that Grange is doing on the different systems. The next day we had was in January, so that was all to do with calf rearing. So in the morning we had a vet looking at just keeping your calf healthy. So we were looking at vaccination programs, procedures when the calf comes onto the farms, and looking a bit on housing and modifying existing housing for calving. And then we went out onto a farm that done onto a DairyBeef 500 farm that would have been doing a good job on the whole calf rearing. The next day was focusing on grassland management. That was in February, the end of February. So we had some of the lads in from Grass 10. So they would have went through just looking at setting up the farm for grazing on a dairy calf to beef system. We did a bit on pasture base and measuring grass, and then we went out onto one of the farms that was really doing a good job on the grass side of things. Then in April we went out to we would have looked at mid-season management. So again in the morning, we kind of looked at the whole so looking at maybe at that time of the year we had calves transitioning from inside to outside. We looked at how to really get maximum weight gain from grass during the mid-season, and then we looked at probably a bit on parasite control and weed control as well. And then again we went out to a DairyBeef 500 farm in the afternoon and looked at we just went out to a farm that was really getting good weight gain coming from grass during the mid-season. And then finally in August we had a day that really looked at just the finishing side of things. So we went to the factory in the morning. We had a number of cattle lined up, so we all got to look at them and handle them cattle. Some were underfleshed, some of them were overfleshed, and some of them were right. And we went through the whole kill line. We'd seen them cattle killed, and then we looked at the carcass as well. And then a factory agent would have went through it with us, why they require certain specs and why they do not like other specs, so overweight cattle and underweight cattle. Then again in the afternoon we went out onto a farm and we had groups of cattle that were close to finishing, cattle that were probably 2 months away from finishing with feeding, and then we cattle that were probably 4 or 5 months away from feeding. So we handled them. It was just really to kind of get an idea of cattle that are close to slaughter, cattle that need to be fed, and cattle that are probably a bit away from feeding that need to be grown. The free needs to be grown on them. So look, the feedback from the students. So we done a bit of a survey, and looks the students were very happy with the course. They're happy with the content of the course and the structure of the course. So look, we're starting up 2 new courses in December. So there'll be a northern region one and a southern region course set up. That's starting on the 6th of December. Google Dairy Calf to Beef new entrant course. It'll come up there, and you can register to do an expression of interest. And then if the numbers haven't filled up, we'll contact you and we send you a link to register onto the course. But look, anyone who's in the calf to beef, whether they're thinking about going in, whether they're existing farmers or even dairy farmers that rear a lot of calves, it's a good thing to do, because what we see out in ground is that some lads are doing everything right. They're making good profits per hectare from dairy calf to beef production. But then on the flip side, lads that are just missing certain targets and maybe slipping on certain aspects of the whole calf rearing, they're barely breaking even. So look, there is different skills that can be learned, whether you're a new entrant or an existing, what will help you have a profitable enterprise at the end of the day.
Thanks very much, Fergal. I'll include the link to the podcast text for any farmer that's interested in registering for the course. Thanks very much, Alan, and thanks very much, Fergal, for the update on the DairyBeef 500 programme. That's all for this week's episode, and my thanks to Alan and Fergal for joining me on the show. You can catch up on all other shows and interviews from the Beef Edge podcast on the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie, or you can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe so you never miss a show. For all other updates from our beef programme, keep an eye on our Twitter and Facebook pages. Until next time, I'm Catherine Egan, and thanks for listening.